Wow. Today I'm with Jeff Lebesch. I have been looking forward to talking to him for so long, and I want to tell you about because that main name may not be familiar to everyone, but it should be because Jeff is the pioneering co-founder of New Belgium Brewery. He's also the mastermind behind the iconic Fat Tire Amber Ale. It inspired a transformative 1985 European bike tour, and Jeff played a crucial role in introducing the Belgian influences to the American beer landscape. He was born in Milwaukee, and Jeff's journey took him from being an avid home brewer in Fort Collins to actually shaping the trajectory of the American craft beer industry. He has since left New Belgium and has delved into all kinds of hobbies from sailing to woodworking. And that's what a lot of our conversations have been about, Jeff, since we first met, because it seemed like every time we had an opportunity to meet, you were going on some fantastic trip. Now, you just went somewhere, right?
Yes, I was just 2 weeks in Switzerland on a trek in the Bernese Oberland area of the Alps. It was 9 days.
A bike trek?
No, it was hiking.
Oh.
Hiking
Well,
in high altitude through the high parts, the tough trails
serious
in that
high
area.
altitude.
Yeah. It's not. I mean, maybe it gets up to about 12,000 feet. I think that was our high point. It's not as serious as the 16,000 feet that I experienced last summer on a trek in Peru, also in July. But
Wow, I can only imagine. Well, we're here to talk about one of the most iconic beers in the craft brewing industry. And I've got one right here, and I've been dying to open it. Is there any chance if I open it and pour it, you'll talk about it, maybe how it compares to your original homebrewed 1985 Fat Tire Amber Ale?
okay, we can do that.
So, Jeff,
All
tell us
right.
about this guy.
Okay, well, my original concept of the Fat Tire beer was a beer, in a nutshell, it was a beer that had a lot of flavor and average alcohol content, 5% by volume. And for me, that would include a lot of a wide variety of malts, crystal malt, Munich malt, some biscuit malt is fairly important, and modest on the hops. And the original Fat Tire, the Amber Ale formula, was darker than the beer that we see here, and it was really an enjoyable drink, and it was something that was nice to have, lots of flavor, like I said, and easy on the alcohol. This beer, the new Fat Tire Ale, they dropped the amber from the description, is a little bit lighter in color and a little bit lighter in that specialty malt formula. And it definitely hews towards the legacy flavor profile. We can taste some of those toasty malts in there, but it's quite a bit lighter. Still, it's a really still a really enjoyable drink.
Yeah, it's a bit lighter in color, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. So it's not possible to call it an amber ale anymore. I mean, we could see in that picture you just had there's a little bit of color to it. It's not a pale ale by any means. So
No, not by any means. Well, I like it. It's a very refreshing beer, maybe in contrast to the original. But I will have to say, as you and I were talking earlier, I'm not always looking for a refreshing beer that I would drink after cutting the lawn or whatever. But when your original concept of the Fat Tire, what were you hoping to create at that point? Was that a lawnmower beer, or was that a different kind of beer?
no, absolutely, it was not a lawnmower beer at all. It was supposed to be a beer of character and a variety of hops, downplayed compared to the malt profile. But it was definitely a craft beer, and what we'd call a craft beer. We didn't use the word craft so much 40 years ago, but it was a specialty beer for sure, not a lawnmower beer by any means. as a home brewer, there's no way I could first would be interested in trying to duplicate a light lager or anything like that, and then also the skill set and the materials and the process available to homebrewers back in the 80s just wouldn't happen. Couldn't make a decent light beer anyway. Wouldn't even tried.
Well, and it doesn't sound like you really wanted to.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting difference as you compare the two in such an iconic flavor profile. Do you think this will open it up to a different audience?
Certainly, that was the hope of the brewers and management at New Belgium, and we do have a different audience. When this beer first came out, I first brewed it in 1985. It was first introduced as a commercial beer in 1991. We're getting on quite a few years here, and so the audience that's the primary consumer of beer today wasn't even born then. So we have a different audience, and that's reasonable to expect that there'll be some evolution of preferences. Some people say, "Oh, I'm not going to drink my grandfather's beer," and well, some of the first Fat Tire drinkers are now grandfathers, and so I couldn't answer, is this going to appeal to the new generation? The marketing and development people at New Belgium think it is, so I can only hope that really works.
Well, as you experience it, is it a positive experience when you have this beer?
Well, that's a mixed thing. Certainly, personally, I'm saddened that the original formula that I came up with has gone away, at least for now. But I am thrilled that the company is making a lot of effort to keep the brand going, whatever they can do, and not just hang on to the whatever it was, and maybe the brand just goes away. They were seeing a drop in sales. Certainly, it was a significant drop in volume for the company. For a long time, it was more than half the volume produced by the company, and by late last year, I think it was down to about a quarter. And a lot of that's been replaced by the Voodoo Ranger series. And so apparently some of the distributors were actually thinking, that this is sliding so fast, maybe we're thinking about taking it off the shelf. And that was definitely an alarm bell for New Belgium. And they said, we don't want this beer to just keep sliding. We're going to do something to preserve it and to keep it going. What is that going to be? Not sure. And I don't know what sort of marketing research the marketing people there have done. I'm sure they've worked it over fairly carefully. But the bottom line that I'm most impressed by and happy to see is how hard they're working to maintain the story of Fat Tire. I mean, Fat Tire is, on one hand, it's not just the beer. It's not just the amber ale. There's a whole story that goes behind it. And that story was a major part of the marketing presence of New Belgium throughout the 90s, especially in the early aughts. And that story is really important, and I'm really glad they're working hard to keep that going.
So I would love to hear that story. I've been to New Belgium many times, and usually the employees tell it in a most entertaining way. I will have to say the tours at New Belgium are second to none. The employees seem to have so much fun there. I couldn't believe it at the Asheville facility. There was even a slide, a spiral slide that goes down. Yeah, but they always tell the best stories. But I want to hear the Jeff Lebesch story, because I've never heard that before.
Okay. Where did Fat Tire come from? The Fat Tire story? In 1985, I had a chance with the engineering company I was working for at the time to go to Europe. I had to spend some time in England to repair some equipment. And I added on some personal time off to extend that trip, and I thought I would make it a bike trip. And so it was my first tour of any sort in Europe, and I decided to make it a bike trip. At the time, I had just gotten a relatively new mountain bike, which was a 1984 stump jumper, specialized stump jumper. And I so loved that bike that's the one that I took on the tour. So taking a mountain bike on a road tour, not necessarily the most efficient thing, but I was having fun with it. Also at that time in the mid-'80s, mountain biking was coming of age, or starting to be known. That specialized stump jumper was one of the first commercially made mountain bikes at that time. And they were often known as fat tire bikes, because some of the earliest mountain bikes were built out of old one-speed cruiser bikes, definitely had balloon tires. But in any case, the mountain bikes with their bigger, fatter, knobbly tires definitely earned the title of fat tire as well. So I'm riding around Europe with my mountain bike and enjoying lots of beers, studying great stuff, and came home from that trip and decided to make a beer in memory of that trip. And because I had a mountain bike on the trip, I named it Fat Tire. That was September 25th something. I think it was September 25th, 1985. It was a homebrew. I still have the notes from that, handwritten notes. And I thought it would just be a one-off, funny beer, quirky name. But it was good. It came out really nice. And a lot of my friends loved it. And anyway, that's the origin of Fat Tire itself. It was a mountain bike, a road bike trip done on a mountain bike in Europe.
So was your creation of the Fat Tire before that iconic pub that you stopped in, or brasserie, I guess, or I'm not sure the right word, in Belgium, the place that was supposed to be closed, but you had it to yourself?
Yes, these were two different trips. And so the second trip was in 1988, and I had Michael Jackson's Pocket Guide to Beer. It was a great travel accompaniment at the time, and he directed me to Bruges Biertje in Bruges, or Brugge, and that was, I had been traveling around Belgium for a few days at that point, and visiting a few different places, landing in Bruges. And so I went following Michael Jackson's guideline, found the pub in the middle of the day and saw the sign on the door. It said, our normal opening days are Thursday to Tuesday, closed on Wednesday. And oh, great, this is a Wednesday, I'm not going to be able to get there. But it happened to also be a national holiday. And so scribbled on a piece of paper below the normal opening hours sign was a note in Flemish that said, because of the national holiday, we're going to open at 4 o'clock, our normal time. See you then. So I showed up at 4 o'clock. Most of the patrons of the bar that would normally be there on the other days at 4 o'clock said, well, it's Wednesday, we're not going to the bar because they're closed. And so I had a chance to meet with Jan de Bruyne, the co-owner, co-founder, and he was just super passionate about Belgian beers, and he, when I told him I wanted to learn about Belgian beers, he loved it. That was his element, and he was bringing out different beers, and he brought out books in Flemish and French and German, none of which I could read, but I could see the pictures and I could recognize certain words like Hallertauer hops. And then he brought out spices, and he was giving me the spices to try and pull a few beers out of his cellar. And so he was just a full-throated gushing of Belgian beer culture, and it was intoxicating, really. And I had an hour and a half with him all to myself, before any other customers came in that day. And that was the moment I was just totally hooked on Belgian beers at that time. And I had been, another story of how I came to be interested in being in the brewing industry, but we'll circle back to that. Anyway, so here I was, just over the top, in love with these Belgian beers, and also wanting to start a brewery, microbrewery as we called it then, and that kind of clicked. I would say that moment was the moment that I flipped from just being a passionate home brewer and beer student to a brewery and planning.
And were Belgian beers common? I mean, could you go in a bottle shop and find a Belgian beer?
Well, you could find a few. It was quite rare. In Fort Collins, we had access to Chimay, Duvel, and some sweetened, highly fruited Lindemans beers, Creek and Frambozen. And that was about it. And so the knowledge of Belgian beer in the United States in the mid-'80s was very thin, and most people associated it with bacteria beers or sour beers. And that is certainly the most famous of the Belgian beer styles, but also probably the smallest of the small niche production in Belgium, and then and still today. The lambics and the other sour beers that are not
taste
spontaneous.
palates, people were not accustomed to such flavorful Belgian beers, were they?
No, not at all. Not at all. And in the homebrew area at the time, it was all about British beer styles, pale ale, bitter, porters and stouts. And homebrewers rarely delved into the German-style lagers, although that was known, it was talked about, but that was really hard to make a good German-style lager. So we were totally breaking new ground to think that we could introduce Belgian-style beers in the United States. I didn't really care so much. I was so passionate about bringing this style of beer to the craft industry that it didn't really matter that people didn't know. I felt it as part of our duty to educate the American beer drinker on the Belgian beer styles and the great variety that could be found in that grouping.
Well, what a difference you've made, and I've got a refrigerator full of them. I love your triple, and my wife's favorite is your 1554. I mean, just iconic beers, and of course now there's the whole Voodoo Ranger series, which is probably about as non-Belgian as you could get.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
So
sorry, go ahead.
And that came out after you left New Belgium, right? The Voodoo Ranger series?
Yes, that's right. I was hesitant to jump into the IPAs at all because I felt it was so far removed from Belgian beer styles. But the writing was on the wall that if you wanted to survive as an American craft beer maker, IPA had to be on the portfolio. Couldn't really be a highly successful business without it. So I think I knew it was coming, but I didn't do anything to try to stop it. And it wasn't something I was pushing for either. So the most exotic parts of New Belgium's profile, at least in terms of number of beers, has shrunk over the years. And some people might even say there's not much Belgium left in New Belgium. But I think some of the most important ones that define the early character of the company are still there. You mentioned two, Triple and 1554. And then, of course, the entire sour beer series that's anchored by La Folie, that's still there. Yep. And so those are very special. Those are continually produced. And then specials come out of the pilot brew house and sometimes out of the main brew house that also dabble in different Belgian styles. So it doesn't represent a great volume for the company, but certainly it's still there.
Oh, I know. Visiting your tap room I've been to both the Colorado location and the Asheville, North Carolina. I mean, seems like, I don't know, must be 30 taps.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's pretty amazing how many different beers they have there. The pilot brew house in Fort Collins does create a lot of interesting stuff, and a lot of that makes it onto that rack of handles in the tasting room.
So, Jeff, I know the amber ale is not really particularly yeast forward, but can you talk about the yeast, where it came from, what the origins of it were?
The yeast for Fat Tire is not a special yeast, as you said. It is an ordinary ale yeast. It was probably my early brews might have been actually once I learned how to culture yeast, which was remarkable and essential step to making decent beer. The first Fat Tire was made with dry yeast, of course, and that was probably what might have been called a Chico ale yeast. It was probably a derivative of Sierra Nevada ale yeast. So, yes, the Fat Tire yeast is an ordinary ale yeast. Quickly following my first trip to Belgium, I tried to recreate some of those beer styles, and my favorite was the Chimay Grand Reserve, and I tried to replicate that. The Chimay of those years in the 80s and 90s, early 90s, is a lot different than it is today. It turns out they had a multitude of, I should say, a mixed culture of yeast that produced some very exotic flavors. And that was part of the profile that I was excited about. And so I tried to formulate a homebrew and I thought the malt profile was fitting to a Chimay copy, but the beer it kind of tasted like Fat Tire Dark. It just was not there. And then I realized maybe I need to do some yeast culturing. And I learned how to do that, the aseptic propagation of yeast, harvesting yeast out of a bottle. And that was definitely the aha moment, the culturing the Chimay yeast, putting it in that beer that I had formulated. And it was night and day difference, and that was key. That was really what unleashed the character of that beer, which ultimately became known as Abbey. And Abbey in its 7.5% alcohol format, and then also Abbey Grand Cru at about 9%.
Yeah, I failed to mention the Abbey. That's also one of my wife's favorite, but she also likes Chimay, so that's probably the connection.
Okay, yes.
Do you worry? You and I are old enough to remember New Coke.
Yes.
And I understand your description that the brewery's trying to keep it alive, and maybe this is a way to keep it alive. But do you worry in the back of your mind it could be a New Coke?
I do. I'm worried. I hope it either stimulates the brand and stimulates the sales, or maybe they end up going back and advertising that, oops, we made a mistake. Maybe you really like the amber ale formula. We're going back and then make a big deal out of it. I don't remember what happened with the New Coke.
Do you think they'd be willing to do that? I mean, I know you talked a little bit to the head brewer. We both know, Christian Holbrook.
Yes. Would they be willing to do that? I think they're going to. They have to. I mean, they're a for-profit business, so they have to do what they think is going to, first of all, make business sense. But what's remarkable with the company, even after the acquisition by Lion Little World Beverage, is that they're not solely focused. They did not turn their focus solely to profits. They still keep the company culture, and they still promote the beer culture, and they have a strong desire to keep this brand going, even if the sales are shrinking. They do not want it to go away, even if profit
Well, we
and loss
don't want a
statement might say
repeat
they should.
of what's happening at Anchor right now at all.
Ooh. No. Yeah, it's well, I don't know that. I know that Anchor has closed just days ago, and that's really sad. They were such a iconic force in the industry, but they weren't. Well, I should say they're an iconic brand, but they weren't so much a force in the industry. They didn't really seem to innovate and get out there. We didn't really see much of them, other than the older folks like us who remember them and fondly. They probably had a hard time attracting the new customers.
Well, they didn't create a Voodoo Ranger or
Yeah.
anything like that, and that's where that importance of innovation is coming up.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, are you going back to New Belgium, or to not New Belgium, to Belgium anytime soon for a bike tour? I know the company tours, sometimes you go along. Is that what I've heard?
I used to go. I haven't gone for a few years, and there's talk about inviting me back on that. And so I would love to do that. I would love to go and be part of that group. I do not have a trip to. Well, actually, I take that back. I do plan. I have a road trip planned in September and October, and I do plan to pass through southern Belgium, and actually would like to stay at the guest house at the Chimay Abbey, which is known as Auberge de Potapre, and kind of touching on that first that first beer that I was so excited about, first Belgian beer. Get to see that
I
again.
stayed there about 18 months ago. I was fortunate enough to judge the Brussels Beer Challenge, and when I got done, I swung by Chimay and stayed there.
Oh, really?
And
Okay.
got the tour. Fabrice was just a marvelous host, and if you don't know Fabrice, I will introduce you.
Well, that'd be good. I'd appreciate that. No, I don't know. I don't have any current contacts there.
Okay, I'll do that.
All right, good. Thank you.
Well, back to the fat tire though. What if they were to come back and say, "Gosh, Jeff, we didn't have the increase in sales that we were hoping for." What do you think you'd tell them?
What would I tell them?
Yeah,
I would
what
say,
would you try?
I don't know what to do. You guys are steering this ship, and I'd love to see it come back. But I'd love to see the amber ale formula come back. But and I have friends and relatives who are closer to my age than to the bulk of the beer drinking population. So we all feel the same way. But they have to figure out their own way, really. If they wanted to bring the amber ale back, I would obviously totally support that, and even help them out in whatever ways I can.
And I guess there's the problem with shelf space that they couldn't have put a new name, the Amber Ranger, just to and leave Fat Tire alone. But I guess that's a shelf space problem, isn't it?
Sure. There's never been a time when there hasn't been competition for the shelf space. So if Fat Tire went away, that space would get sucked up by something else. So yeah, I think it was important to maintain the name. And it's the bike is still the bike. That's the Fat Tire logo, and it's still part of the company logo. So it's can't really get rid of that without significantly altering the what's happening with the company.
Well, I would like to kind of close with just one aspect. Every time I talk to you, you're generally on a bike, and I was surprised when you weren't on one in Switzerland. But it seemed like you were always associated with biking. Some of your ideas came from biking. Can you just talk about that state of mind that you seem to get, not necessarily with just biking, but what you experience on your treks and your biking and all that? Because not many people have invented a company on a bicycle seat.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's yeah. Riding a bike has always been a great thrill for me, and I remember my first biking when I first learned how to bike when I was 4 or 5 years old, and the whole string of bikes that I've had, and different adventures and misadventures I've had on them, and it's always been a thrill to jump on a bike and head down the road and wind in my face and sort of the cares fly away, and especially on the longer rides, I get to be really introspective and thinking about things, and that's that's how Fat Tire and the company were genuinely born on a bike. That was my thing. In later years now, I'm finding long bike trips are a little bit more painful, and my skeletal muscles and ligaments and stuff. So the upright hiking, intensive hiking, is a little bit easier for me. But I have a bike trip still in Europe planned again for late October. So I'm excited about that.
So you're optimistic for the new Fat Tire because it hopefully will continue what you invented years ago.
Almost, well, it'll be close to 40 years, but yeah, I'm absolutely whatever we can do to keep the story alive. I'm in favor of that. Very optimistic. I think the company is doing what they can to keep it going, and I'm very, very happy to see that they're working so hard at that.
Well, I have to ask one question as we really get to the end of our time. But as you know, I'm a home brewer. Christian Holbrook actually helped me with the recipe of the 1554, which was, according to my wife, the best home brew that I make. So she likes those dark lager-like beers, even though that's not a lager. So what did home brewing kind of prepare you for this whole journey? I know it was that everything started from home brewing. It might have been cooked up on a bicycle seat, but you're already home brewing. Is there some aspects of home brewing that you just really enjoyed and got you to where you are?
Sure. It was the creativity and the problem solving. It's easy enough to read a process for a simple home brew and it's, okay, that's a decent beer, but it could be better. And so that iterative process of quality improvement and learning was really what I got out of homebrewing. One of the two things, and the other is just being so closely connected with the broad specialty beer market, whether it's commercially produced or homebrew, and in the homebrew competitions, the craft beer competitions. Being connected that way was important exposure to different beer styles and different techniques needed to improve the quality, and that was the learning how to persevere through troubles, problem solve, and keep going. Always in the pursuit of higher quality beer.
Yeah, I know. I've got some beer stains on my ceiling in my brewery where I went through some learning experiences.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, this is fantastic. And just people may ask, where are you, without giving too many details, it looks like you're in a great cabin. Is this are you traveling, or is this a mountain house that you enjoy?
This is a mountain house. Love it here. It's about a 2-hour drive from Fort Collins. And the wood paneling you see behind me is it's made to look like a hand-hewn log wall. We built this cabin in 2014 and 15, And we in Colorado and large parts of the Rockies, there was a beetle epidemic that killed a lot of the trees, and we have a lot of pine trees around here. And so all of the wood for the cabin, including what's behind me, I cut and sawed myself, and with the help of some others. But we built all the wood in here. We harvested ourselves from the property, and so that's part of my woodworking hobby. And
Wow, that's pretty serious. I knew you did woodworking, but cutting your own lumber, that takes it to a new level. Well, Jeff, you're always amazing, and every time I talk to you, you've gone on some fantastic journey, and I appreciate you taking the time. I'm excited that Fat Tire, that the brands behind it want to try and keep it alive. And I hope we can talk again, maybe in the future, I'm going to be actually in Europe in October too, so I might see if we're going to be anywhere near each other at the same time.
Okay, that'd be fun to cross paths and share a beer. That'd be nice.
Well, we'll see if we can make it happen.
Okay.
I owe you some contacts at Chimay, and thank you so much for your time today, Jeff.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Doug. I enjoyed the time together.